Hello, my friends, and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and in today's video, sponsored by the makers of Rise of Kingdoms, archers are back! QSH is the best commander possibly the game has literally ever had! And yes, this is what archers needed, gosh darn it. So, in this video, I'm going to break down the best hero or commander combinations. We're going to talk about the best talents and equipment and armaments. And look, there is a lot you can optimize with QSH now in the mix with his rage consumption mechanic instead of a rage accumulation mechanic, all right? So first things first, let's talk about the different commander combinations you can use. And I'll just tell you off rip here, if you're using just one commander combination, the best way you can run that is QSH with Chisgule. I mean, it's not a secret. I predicted this would be the best way to run it. It is the best way to run it. And until I've seen data proving otherwise, this is what I'm sticking with as my number one combination for archers in the game. If you're going to run one commander pair of archers, you first work on QSH and then you work on Chisgule. This dude is an absolute freaking monster. Now, normally in a video in this style, I will review all the pairs and then talk about talents and equipment. So let's just go and look at the other commander combinations you could do when you go to 2 commander pairs, when you go to 3 commander pairs, all with archers. So as we mentioned, if you're making only one pair of archers, you're just going to use QSH with Chisgule, and it's the easiest win of your life in Rise of Kingdoms. But what happens when we start to do 2 commander pairs? This is where things start to get a little bit spicy, but I think it's pretty uncontroversial at this point. I think we want to take Chisgule, go with Hermann Prime. We're going to take QSH, and we're going to put Isong behind him. So the reason you want to do this is because QSH is super rage hungry. And the other advantage of doing this is that you're going to fire off ridiculous amounts of AoE skill damage. Isong is enhancing skill damage dramatically, and so QSH skill damage getting enhanced is really major. Pretty cool that one of the first commanders you could have invested in the game is actually still cooking with gas, and we can say that with a straight face. Now, when you get to 3 commander pairings, here is where you have some options. I think Ashurbanipal is a really good take because he's doing solid area of effect damage. To really maximize what you can do with archers, however, I have not found Shajar to be it. I have tried, and I have tried, and I have tried, and I can't get Shajar to get the kind of results that I want to see. No AoE damage, she's buffing the team, but I feel like it's just not enough. I even tried using her with Philip, and she's the secondary, and I just could not get it to work. I had an artifact, so it was all infantry stats. I can't get her to work. Okay, I genuinely wanted it to, and I couldn't. Could just be a me thing. Okay, but I think that although she's a consideration, we're not going to use her. Nebu, older than time, only a little bit older than Isong, or I guess younger than Isong. Whatever, you know what I meant. Here's the thing. I think what you do here is pretty straightforward. You have to bring in Philip. Even though he's not an archer, he's your best option for what you could do. Now, I generally, for a long time, have advised at this point against 3 archer marches in Rise of Kingdoms. I think that you're better off with other stuff, and archers have not been it. You know, archers are cool now, and that's awesome, but I think that generally speaking, you see phases of this, cycles of this. So at most, 2 marches of each troop type is pretty solid, and then leadership, and then maybe you go for a third. But anyways, I digress here. Hopefully you have Philip. The dude is the GOAT. I think that pairing Philip with Chisgule is probably the way to go. You take Hermann Prime, you pair him with Ashurbanipal, and that's where you land. And the synergy between Ashurbanipal and Hermann Prime is that Hermann Prime is going to do extra activations of an active skill when you've poisoned enough times. You've got Ashurbanipal making it so that when you use active skills, you get a buff. So the synergy there is minor, but meaningful-ish, I guess, right? It's not nothing. And I think that's your best way of breaking it down in the New World Order. Which brings us to a very interesting set of questions around, so what is the best equipment? What is the best armaments? And what are the best talents? And I think I want to start with talents because this is where there's really kind of like a lot that you can do, especially in the QSH view of the world. Now, I know most people are here for QSH, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll go over a generic build first and then double down on what you do with QSH. This right here is the generic build that I would generally recommend. Oh my God, why is everybody rallying Barb for it? Holy smokes. This is the build I would recommend for most archers. If you're using Zhuge Liang primary, do this. If you're using Ashurbanipal primary, do this. If you're using QSH with Esong, something like this is pretty solid. Technically, there's an alternate build you can run here where you go like this, you get this over here, and you get the march speed over here that people are kind of enjoying right now. So you max that out, and we've got 1 point left over here after getting this march speed. This march speed build seems to be popular. You could put the point into Naked Rage. You could put the point over here. I'd probably put it in Naked Rage. I don't know why we have 1 point left, but we do. GG. So this is a build that is very popular right now for QSH if you're in the situation where you're pairing with Esong. That's what I'm going to do on my main account. But if you're running only one Archer March, like I am on my restart account, this is a very interesting build, given that I have a horn. So I made an entire dedicated video to all of the variants that you can do with QSH, and whether or not you have horn, you have external sources of rage like William buffs coming through, or in some cases we're talking about like Trajan buffs, although that's more of like a Canyon thing. You could have, for example, Echelon Formation Civilized giving rage, or you could have drums. Depending on your rage situation, you peel away more and more of the ways that you would generate rage from this tree and put them other places to do more damage, okay? But the safest way to run it, the safest way, is to peel off some of these extra talent points that we're putting over here and here, and you grab Rejuvenate. That is an alternate route. Again, I made a dedicated video of this. I'll have a card up in the top and in the end screen that goes way more in depth on some of these variations and what you can do and exactly why it is that it works that way, okay? All of that to say, interestingly, the build where you move all in on the Archer tree is not what you do for any other commander for the open field, okay? Now, there might be a few exceptions here and there, but the reason is that rage generation is king in this game. So for all of your other archers, you're going to be running for, again, Zhuge Liang, Ashurbanipal, Money Where My Mouth Is, a build like this over here. This, I think, is the way to go. I prefer this personally over the little bit of march speed over here, although you can make the argument for march speed as being very OP. It's going to depend on your situation. It's going to depend on the hero or commander pairing you're using and whether or not that has march speed. So you could use that alternate variation for the speed if you need it. This is what I'm using. Again, Money Where My Mouth Is on Zhuge Liang, Ashurbanipal, etc. When I run those as primary in the field. Okay. Now, on the topic of equipment, in 2025, players seem to have locked in on 3 different gear configurations as meta. And I can talk briefly about like, hey, what might you use to get there? But instead, I might refer you to prior videos I've done because I've covered it a lot. Archers have some really cool options, so I'll only kind of cover it briefly. But the end state for archers that you're looking for is one of 3 different configurations. The configuration that I went for, that I understand to be most optimal for QSH specifically, is going to be what you see here. KVK pieces plus 4-piece archer set is a really solid way to go. Now, it could be that this only ends up beating, I don't know for sure, I'm just hypothesizing here, this might only end up beating the 6-piece bonus once you have everything talented. So the 6-piece archer set I also have found to be very powerful, and the 6-piece bonus is 5% health, which is very strong in Rise of Kingdoms. So health is generally the preferred stat over defense, which is preferred over attack. And that's because of the way diminishing returns work with stats in this game. So the 6-piece archer set is really good. The 4-piece archer set with the KVK pieces in the end game, that's Season of Conquest endgame stuff, is also very good. And lastly, the thing that people seem to align on as being meta, okay, in other cases other than QSH, is to have the 2-piece KVK, as you see here, the 2-piece archer for the chest and the gloves, or the 2-piece, I guess I should say, and the 2-piece leadership for legs and boots. So the 2-piece leadership for legs and boots, interestingly enough, is giving health. And troop health, as I just finished saying, is incredibly valuable, as you can see here. So you could put those health pieces onto the archers, and that is arguably one of the best sets you could use for Zhuge Liang primary or Ashurbanipal primary. The health is really, really good there. Now, we are talking about a couple percentage points of effectiveness here and there, and it is kind of funny that this was not sort of the meta archer set. It was the 2-2-2, and now this arguably is the meta archer set. So things are going to move in and out of style. Personally, on my main account, where I have 2 sets of archer gear, I went all in on one 6-piece bonus set and one set that you see at, just as I've done here. Okay? That's the way that I've managed my sort of 2 archer sets and the way that I've approached it. Whether or not you use the leadership gear, entirely up to you. If you want to go that route, I totally get it. And I think it is in some cases, in the current meta, optimal. Plus, leadership pieces have some versatility, so you could use them with other troop types until you get a special talent, if you ever get a special talent. So there's some extra value to kind of having leadership pieces that I think is actually kind of a compelling reason to have some variation in your equipment, rather than kind of doubling down on the exact same stuff for like every kind of set you do for infantry, cavalry, or archers, right? Because if the meta changes, then you can take advantage of it. And the percentage point diff here is, again, pretty small. The only thing I would say is that outside of the KVK pieces and the set pieces, I personally would not be crafting any of the archer legendary gear. My understanding is that none of that is meta at this exact moment in time. So you could do it if for some reason you were, I don't know, material rich and pattern poor, but again, it feels unlikely to me, okay? Now, when it comes to the accessories, this is where things get really interesting. I already did a huge deep dive on QSH. If you pair him with Zhuge Liang, weirdly enough, I think that ring and pendant, the skill damage pendant, is the way to go on his damage, okay? And I did a collab with Billet. He proved, again, that these talents I'm recommending were like the way to go, and that the accessories that we're talking about were the way to go. But if you do go in and get things like a horn, like I already have a talented horn, so I'm just going to use it, then you can start to carve off some of those rage-related talent points potentially. Or you could lock it in and say, well, guess what? I have extra rage, but if I'm taking a lot of damage, he can use that rage and convert it into damage mitigation. It all depends on your sort of philosophy of valuing DPS optimizations versus damage mitigation optimizations, both of which are valuable, but for different reasons. Wow. Okay. So other than, using ring and pendant, the alternative here of horn and ring is a classic. I have it. I'm using it. This is what I'm doing, right? It's like, I'm not making anything new for this configuration on this dude. Like, this is talented. I'm locked. It is what it is. I'm changing the talents, not the other stuff. Okay. And for archers, I would say generally something like ring and horn is the way to go for your accessories. So your Zhuge Liang pairing, that's what I'm going to recommend. Your Ashurbanipal pairing, these two are what I'm going to recommend. Now, when we talk about like equipment to build on and how you even get here in the first place, I will have in the end screen a alternate video that probably goes more in depth, and you can just jump in the timestamps. But if we want to talk about that very quickly, we can head over to the Forge here. And I will point out that there is some pretty cool archer stuff that you can use. So as an example, there is a set that you can start off with that's pretty solid, the Revival set. I use that for a long time. You get a couple ways to get some set bonuses here. So as you're graduating into the higher gear, I think that's pretty solid. Generally speaking, you want to find stuff like health, make that the priority, then defense, then attack. And anywhere you can go from an attack stat to a defense or a health stat is going to be your priority for your upgrades as you start to move into higher and higher tiers of rarity with your gear. Now, with regard to Man, with regard to the formations, a lot of interesting stuff going on with QSH specifically. I would say for all your other archers, it could not possibly be more straightforward. Zhuge Liang, Ashurbanipal primary. Like if we just go to the codex here, wedge formation is the answer. You do not need to do circle formation as of the time of this recording, unless you're like a garrison and you're moving in all in on the healing route. But I think we've left the realm where you even want to start that project at this point, where you'd start to work on a CY garrison. So you're all wedge all the time. I think archers are the most likely troop type to soon get a new formation, because every other formation, or rather every other troop type in the game, has like a main and secondary formation. Cavs have kind of like arch or wedge and combo. Infantry have, honestly, they have a wedge approach, they have an arch approach, and they have pincer. So I would expect archers to go kind of the same way, where it's like you could use arch or you could use wedge, and then there's some more special thing. And we don't have that special thing for archers yet. I expect it will come. Until then, great, good news, bad news. All wedge all the time and save up conversion stones, because I bet you will be wishing you could switch later on. That's my suspicion. We'll see. So what do you get from wedge? Well, Hunter is outstanding for the skill damage boost. Weird that this is focused on single target damage, and archers do not do that, which is a part of the reason why I generally think you're going to get something focused on AoE damage. I would bet you. We'll see. Crazed is arguably almost as good as Hunter, depending on your rage situation. But I have seen people advocate for this very, 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 very strongly as being almost as good as Hunter, which sounds crazy, and that's not always true, but rage generation is really busted. And the more rage you generate, as I've proven in prior videos, the more you're interested in other ways of generating rage. There is a rage cap per turn, but you can do some powerful stuff with this right over here. Whenever you deal direct damage, getting this extra rage can be very good, all right? Depends a lot on your setup. From here, we're looking at Unstoppable, incredibly powerful, obviously, and Boiling Blood being great priorities. 10 out of 10 can recommend. And if you're sitting here thinking, well, Chisgule, are you just going to say all the rarest stuff is the best stuff? No, I'm not. When you get over here to the flag, things get weird, really weird. Defiant, very skippable. Reducing the normal damage is very, 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 very skippable, in my opinion. If you're a rally lead, compelling. For open field, extremely skippable. For Zhuge and Ashurbanipal, balanced, very, very good. But for anyone else, QSH, I guess is who I'm talking to, this does not do what you think it does. QSH may or may not ever get to 80% rage, and if he does, he may not ever leave that 80% rage state. So whether or not you're getting balanced once or more than once or never, it's, at the time of this recording, totally up in the air, so very, very skippable, okay? And I would argue the number one priority is over here, and Intrepid and Focus Fire are the two best, I think, in this wedge setup that give you the most value, okay? And these are boosts. Whenever it says boost, this is a multiplier at a different location in the formula, so it is better than like anywhere else that says, you gain skill damage dealt, or you deal more skill damage. The boost is like, anytime you see that word, that's the secret, if you're in the know, language for different location in the formula, okay? Now, there are lots of other really good inscriptions that you can work on that are not the legendary or the rare inscriptions, and I think it is worth calling them out. Robust is always in style, extremely strong. So if you had one of those, I know I do on my main account, I use it. Very, very powerful. Health is just way better typically than you would think, even though recently the crystal tech changed and it's not quite as good. We could talk about Enraged being pretty cool. 2.5% more skill damage is solid. But the one that I really wanted to kind of call your attention to is going to be Furious. Furious is just like really, really crazy on QSH specifically, because you're going to use active skills so fast. The rest of these inscriptions I think are very powerful and interesting, but like 1% extra damage compared to Furious or Enraged here is just like that's not where it's at, in my opinion. Lots of great options here, but I think that's where I'm at for kind of the best ones. It is worth mentioning that Breaker's really cool to have somewhere in your lineup. Somewhere. But these days, like a one of is a cool little piece of flair, but I don't think about it much beyond that. As far as the other slots go, there may be some other really cool takes here, like Fit. Again, I'll just point out as being like really good. Getting the extra skill damage over here, Devious, is pretty legit. I also feel like you can get some really solid damage mitigation in some of these, like Respite and Guarded. I think those are pretty neat. Whenever you take skill damage, 10% chance to gain rage, like kind of cool. I think that this sees like a whole new realm of relevance in the new world order of QSH. Like the mere existence of QSH makes that way more compelling than it ever has been. Okay, like actually, unironically, that is true. Bluster I've always found to be kind of a neat one, but not very reliable. A lot of cool stuff you can do here, but this armament, I really feel like getting to a Boiling Blood is really a priority, in my opinion. The boost to skill damage dealt is just chef's kiss level of excellence, right? And then over here on the banner, this is maybe one of the more important ones worth talking about, because both the legendary and the rare inscription may or may not actually be good for you to have. So I think in that case, assertive is like just the way to go. Your alternatives here for assertive would include strategic, because generally you're going to have your targets surrounded. Not always the case, but if you're multi-marching, which you should aspire to do, and they're still around, like that's kind of your next best pick. Kind of sucks in Canyon though, but like, look, sometimes you get the stats where you get the stats. I still use Cohesive on my main account. Not the most ideal, but hopefully you spend a lot of time over 50%. Is what it is. When you roll high stats, you just, hey, yo. When the dice favor you, you just got to take it. And it's all about the dice here, okay? So, yeah, I think that is where I would land with that. I've really enjoyed on the emblem over here, Hardy, as a very powerful alternative to everything else that's going on. But you could also go for Daring extra skill damage as a fine choice for your archers. Artisan is the better skill damage choice here. 3% more skill damage. It just is just better. Kind of neat the way that works. The taking less damage is also not bad for archers, honestly, right? Try to get the 1.5%ers if you can over the 1%ers if possible, all right? And there you go. That's what you need to know about your archers for the open field. It's a weirdly linear meta. I mean, like other troop types, I feel like I'm giving you like this or that or mix or match and blah, blah, blah. But like, bro, I don't know. It's pretty straightforward for the archers. And with QSH, there is a pretty major focus on rage restoration. But you need to watch my dedicated video about this, where I paired up with Billet and went over all of the QSH secrets, all of a card in the end screen. Go watch that one. I think that will really change your perspective on understanding why and how to generate rage on QSH, all right? Until next time, you have fun smashing your enemies. Take care, everybody.